Joe's great. I've been in rooms with Joe with some relatively formidable people. You know, I was at dinner with him at one point, probably 4 years ago, with what do we call those characters? The international dark web?
Yeah.
Is that it? Eric Weinstein's term? He really nailed that. We're going to put out the IDW drinking song. This is funny. I got to tell you this story. It's so funny. I've been working with this university down in Georgia, in Savannah, called Ralston, and it's a bricks and mortar institution, and we have some fun with it. And we were thinking about a motto. You know, you have a little shield, and then you have a Latin motto. And I asked the president of the university, Stephen Blackwood, what our motto. We started talking about what our motto might be, and I said, well, what's the Latin for "up yours, woke moralists"? So he thought that was pretty funny, and it is pretty funny. I think that would be hilarious, actually, to have that in Latin. And then he said, well, that'd be a good motto. Maybe we need a drinking song. And I thought, well, that's a funny idea. So I don't know, a song popped into my mind. It's Liddy the Pink. It's a famous song from the 1960s. It's an old folk song. We'll drink and drink and drink to Lydia Pink. The pink, the pink. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You get the idea. And I rewrote that as a parody of postmodern philosophy because that seemed to be the thing to do. And then we got a bunch of people to sing it. So Ben Shapiro sings some of it playing the violin, which is very, very funny. And Dave Rubin and this crazy bastard from Concordia University in Canada, Gad Saad, who's an evolutionary biologist who regularly dresses in a purple wig and flagellates himself for committing social justice crimes. And so, and Janice Fiamengo, who Tammy's talked to, who was a feminist at one point, a women's studies professor who had an epiphany 20 years ago and realized that everything she was teaching was toxic to the hilt and has become maybe the world's most effective deep academic critic of feminist thought. And who else do we have in there? Douglas Murray. A whole host of, the usual suspects. And we've made some puppets. One of them, I'm so embarrassed to even tell you this, but it's so funny. There's a woman named Andrea Dworkin, and she's like, if you stacked up toxic femininity and you put someone at the pinnacle, it would be Andrea Dworkin. And she was a hooker for like 10 years. And I'm dead serious. I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. And a busy one. And she didn't like men, and no wonder, no wonder. And Dworkin's most famous line is, all sex is rape. And she's quite influential in radical feminist circles. And we made a puppet with her. And it's nude from the waist up, and she has pasties and swings around a stripper's pole. So, yeah, we have Foucault. We have a Foucault puppet too, and I don't like Foucault very much, even though he was brilliant, Michel Foucault. And some of the things he said were he was onto something, but he's a demented person, intellectually and personally. Very bad actor in the deepest of all possible senses. And we have a Foucault puppet too, and we have him surrounded by children that he's inviting into the back of a van with the promise of candies. So, yeah, so that's all going to come out in the next, we're hoping 2 months, so stay on board for that, man. So, and of course, I've completely forgotten what the question was.
Joe Rogan.
Oh, Rogan.
That's what Joe Rogan means to
Oh, yeah, Rogan. Okay, okay. So, I was in this restaurant with these IDW guys, the ones that are singing this song, and Shapiro was there, Ben Shapiro, and Dave Rubin, and Eric Weinstein, and who else was there? It doesn't matter. You get the picture, and most of you know who Shapiro is, and I don't know what you think of Ben Shapiro, but he is so damn smart that it's just beyond belief, That man, I've been on a plane with him, and I can talk quite a lot, in case any of you haven't noticed, but Shapiro, he's just a machine gun, and I think he probably thinks 5 times faster than anyone you've ever met. And you know how fast he talks? He's thinking way faster than that. The words can barely he can barely keep up with himself. And Eric Weinstein's no slouch either. But still, I've never been in a room and thought that, without harboring the suspicion that Joe Rogan was the smartest person in the room. So, and he plays lunkhead to some degree, and he's a tough guy, and he's got a working class background, and he's banged around, and he's a fighter and a commentator and a comedian, and he's an ordinary guy in the best sense, But man, he's one smart character. He didn't get to where he was by accident. He's been successful in like 4 different domains, right? He has a successful career as a comedian, and he's pretty damn funny. His piece on the Kardashians enticing Jenner into becoming trans it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. You got to check that out on Netflix. I just couldn't. He acts out the devil perched on Jenner's poster bed, screeching to him about becoming female in a Kardashian voice. It's inspired in the best possible way. And Rogan was a fight commentator, and then he started this podcast, and it's just the barest bones podcast you can imagine. It's still like that. He's got a nice studio in Austin. It's quite cool. And it's just him and his producer. That's it. And Joe picks all the guests, and why? Because he wants to talk to them. That's the only reason. Because Joe doesn't need to do this, right? There isn't another driving motivation. He invites people he wants to talk to, and then he asks them all the questions he can think up. And what's fun about Joe, and what makes him unlike the run-of-the-mill, especially legacy journalists, is he's actually asking you questions. The reason Joe's asking questions, this is so strange, is because he wants the answers. So imagine that. Instead of just laying a trap for whoever he's talking to so that they can do themselves in, so that can redound to his benefit, which is what the narcissistic legacy media journalists do. Now, not all legacy media journalists are narcissistic, by the way, but plenty of them are. And the whole enterprise rewards that to some degree. Whereas Joe, he just asks stupid questions. And when I say stupid, I mean, well, you wouldn't ask a question if you weren't stupid, because you'd know the answer. But if you're really wise, then you know you're stupid, and so you'll ask the questions, and then once you get the answer, you're not stupid anymore. And he's been doing that. I mean, how many people has Joe interviewed now? Like 3,000? So imagine now, this is his university. He's had 3,000 of the sharpest people in the world answer every single question he had 4 times a week, 3,000 times. And so Joe's great. He's straight. He's never played a trick on me. He's never asked me a treacherous question. Like, he's no pushover, he's a tough guy. And he's got his opinions, although he doesn't really take them all that seriously, partly because he's a comedian. And what are you going to have, a comedian that takes himself seriously? That's like a woke comedian. And the thing about woke comedians, I don't know if you've noticed this, but they're not funny. And so that means they're actually not comedians. I don't know what the hell they are. Puppets of Satan, I think. But but they're not comedians, that's for sure. And Joe's damn funny. And so that's also delightful, because it's having a conversation with him it's a high form of play, and especially the last conversation I had with him, which was the best one we had, partly because I'm feeling much better than I've been feeling for like 7 years. I mean, the time just flew by, 3 hours later, you're just like done, because 3 hours of intense conversation, that's quite a lot. And so you need a day to recover from going to talk to Joe.